we've got Tracy Baim here, who is the longtime editor and one of the probably co-founders of Windy City Times. And the reason we didn't have you when we had a couple other people for the Women's March in January, because
in the car on the way down, she said you had been on recently about the march. I said no, she was not. She was on.
Thank you for sharing that little piece.
Well, you do a lot of revealing on the show.
Jeez Louise. Tracy, I want to just talk to you now. There's something called the Illinois Women's March on Springfield happening. What is it? Why is it? And how do people get hooked up, as it were?
Well, and let me just say, overlapping with Dr. S, I want to say that there are LGBTQ bills up in Springfield,
Right.
Including identification bills, making it easier for transgender individuals on identification. So the Illinois Women March on Springfield is in the kind of paying a little bit of homage to the January 21st marches around the world, but taking it to Springfield, Illinois, our state capital, where there's very specific legislation coming up and being proposed. So our goal is to take that kind of action and motivation, the coalition building, the kumbaya of that moment, and say, look, there's actual legislation that's going to affect people in Illinois. HB 40, for example, by Sarah Feigenholz, is in Illinois, there's a law that says if Roe v. Wade goes down,
Right.
abortion becomes illegal in Illinois automatically. So HB 40 confronts that. We even have the ERA coming up again, so people are going to be lobbying for that. But we have a list of all these different bills, and this is really the first time we're trying to do a coalition of people that don't always agree with one another, but that we know, okay, so you may not be for gun safety, but you're for immigrant rights, or for LGBT rights, and you don't care about the healthcare, right? I mean, we know that not everybody's going to agree with the entire agenda. In fact, people have said, well, why did you have this on there? And it's because we have to get to the point where we can march together, even if everybody in that march doesn't agree with every
Everything.
Agenda item.
Right.
That's
So we even
good.
have a disclaimer. We have more than 85 organizations that are partnering on this. And believe me, there's some that couldn't because of the pro-choice legislation. But there's a disclaimer that says just because you endorse the march doesn't mean you're endorsing every single agenda item. But overall, I think people are pretty much in agreement on a lot of the big issues. So yeah, we're going to be fighting for 15, and we're going to be fighting for women's choice side by side, and dozens of other bills, including on fracking, on animal rights, on licensing of gun dealers, all sorts of things. And you can pick your issue. Pick one or two of those
I'm
bills.
for all of those.
I knew you would be gay. I knew the show would
No
be.
disclaimer?
No disclaimer.
Okay.
She doesn't even read them so well. And there's criminal justice reform. There's all sorts of things on there. And so pick one or two of them. Lobby now. You don't have to wait. But the march itself is Tuesday, April 25th in Springfield at noon. So there are going to be some buses coming from all over the state. Right now we announced a free bus from Women and Children First. So people can contact the bookstore. Center and Halstead's going to have a free bus. We're hoping Affinity Community Services in Bronzeville is going to have a free bus. So check out Illinois Women March on Springfield.org, and you'll be getting transportation updates. We really are doing a big push in central and southern Illinois. Those are the legislators that really need to hear from their progressive constituents. So we're doing a lot of social media outreach and person-to-person outreach downstate.
Is that Illinois Women's spelled out, Illinois Women?
It's Illinois Women, and not with a possessive, march on Springfield.org.
Okay.
And obviously, everybody's welcome.
The theys, the he's, the she's,
Everybody is
everybody.
welcome. We need everybody. It's all hands on deck. It's a Tuesday during the week, so we know there are many people that can't attend. So if you can attend, you're going to be representing another 10 people that were not able to get off work to go.
Yeah, it's the whole aspect of marching in solidarity with other issue groups and figuring that out. I'm real interested in the process. You said this is involving people who don't necessarily agree
Down with
with one another.
sectarianism.
Right. I mean, a good example is the Responsible Budget Coalition. Certainly, one of the pushes is for a budget.
Right.
But as a coalition, they can't speak for all 300 members of that coalition, so they weren't able to sign on as endorsing it. But individual members like Shriver Center within the coalition are backing it. So we understand that. We understand there's limitations on coalitions. You can't control the whole coalition. But yeah, we do have a lot of coalitions, like the Gun Coalition is definitely backing it. And, our goal, we knew that there had been big marches on Springfield. I did the March on Springfield for American Equality,
Yes.
and that was almost 5,000 people. There's been big union marches, right? But to have a march that's not just one issue, we knew would be a little more complex, and for
Yeah.
people to wrap their head around it. So individual organizations are pushing their own agenda, like obviously Planned Parenthood is pushing the women's agenda and HB 40. But some people are saying, you know what, the point of a march, at least for me, and I've been to many of them, including marches on Washington, is not about the individual legislation. To me, it's about the energy I get from that march that empowers me for the next few months of work. Like feeding off the energy in the room and in the march is really, to me, the ultimate goal. And then also the people meet along the way. Every march I've ever worked on or participated in any event, it's the people I meet that I feel are the experience, right? Yes, of course we got media coverage or we got whatever, but I met great people and I can work in alliance with them on the next project. So really think of it that way. Don't get bogged down in the minutia of any of these protests, including the tax day protest. You're not going to agree with everything on everybody's agenda. But when you go, I guarantee you get fed in a way that you don't always get fed.
You get nourished.
Yeah, you get
Even
nourished.
So,
I had a question.
yeah, go for it, Michael.
You mentioned the ERA, and this is probably educating me. That's the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was not ratified by enough states, as I understand. So my question is, did Illinois ratify it or not?
No, oddly enough, not oddly. Illinois, there was huge battles. The feminists of the previous generation talk of the legendary battles against Phyllis Schlafly in Springfield, Illinois in the late 70s.
She is gone now to the Great
She's
Spirit
gone.
Land.
Let's do this in her honor. Let's pass it.
Yeah.
But there's only, so one recent state just passed it. So there's only 2 left. And people say that it still is viable. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not any kind of lawyer, so I can't speak to that. But even the symbolic nature of finally getting enough states, so we need 2 more to get the Equal Rights Amendment, which is all of 18 words. And I graduated college in 1984, a few years after the big battles. On my cap, I put the 18 words of the Equal Rights Amendment at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. They allowed me to graduate anyway, but I wanted to show that you could basically fit the ERA on your cap, and how ridiculous it was, the fights against it. It's interesting because we just had a ruling this week that said that the 1964 Civil Rights Act is actually covering gay people. It came out of Chicago.
Oh, yeah, that was a big
And
decision.
so that's a huge decision, right?
Huge.
And so that's also precedent setting for LGBTQ overall and women as well. I think that that could be, if it's held up when it goes forward, which we can only hope, could be a big opening as well. Obviously, the Equal Rights Amendment was meant to address any previous deficiencies in the law, so I think the ERA should still be passed.
What
And-
states are still an option to pass it?
You know what? I would have to look. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
fine.
I apologize. It's you have to have. I think you have to have 35.
Yeah, and there are 33 or 4 now.
Yeah, we need 2 more.
Oh,
And,
yeah, that's right.
Illinois
We need
is
2.
obviously very viable. I don't know what Rauner's stance would be on it at all, but I feel like with the Democrats, this should be made a priority as
Yeah.
a payback to all of the work that women have done in building the Democratic Party in Illinois and have done recently. The problem is there seems to be no motivation for the leadership of the Democratic Party to call some of these bills. HB 40, for example, needs to be called for a vote. These people need to be on record, and they're obviously terrified of being on the record. So a lot of the push of the march, and prior to the march and after the march really, is to get the votes called. Democrats need to be on the record. They control the Senate and the House. So no excuses. These bills need to be called.
So does that mean that we've got some Democrats kind of hiding out on these issues?
I think,
Dogs.
well, on HB 40, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a conscious vote on pro-choice,
Right.
right? So Planned Parenthood probably has a better understanding of the specific people that need to be pushed, but probably anybody outside of the city of Chicago, which is relatively safe, is going to have issues with opponents in next year's election.
So that's kind of an issue that troubles a lot of us. We have good reps for the most part from our neck of the woods. We have Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who is a great fighter in the resistance, and all the other reps seem to be, for the most part, in line with.
Not Lipinski.
Well, Lipinski isn't ours.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how do we effectively, do you have any ideas about how we effectively touch the mindsets of folks who do not represent us and who may or may not be fully representing the point of view of their folks.
I think the best group doing the work right now, I mean, there's many, many terrific
Yeah.
groups doing the work, but Indivisible,
Yeah.
there's a woman named Lenny who's part of our march and was part of the DC march, and she's phenomenal. She's running Indivisible Illinois. They are doing it at the grassroots level, district by district, congressional district, and hopefully, in Lipinski's district, for example, maybe there is gonna be a woman running, at least one person running against Lipinski, and Roscom, and other
Yeah.
folks that are, they're very vulnerable based on the new activism that this administration has brought out. Let me just say, I didn't experience the 1960s, I was born 63, but to me, the kind of people that now are politically active, in my 33 years of doing this, I've never, since the days of ACT UP, never seen so many new people to hardcore political activism. Not just
Right.
showing up to one march, but actually educating themselves bill by bill. The tech
Yes.
industry in Chicago has come forward with things like Witness Slip Project and ways that people can really engage at a school board level, right? So I am really heartened by that. The recent April 4th elections, for example, there was a great turn back against anti-trans candidates running for school board in Palatine.
Right.
Okay, 10 years ago.
Right.
I mean, this was written up in the Washington Post.
Yes.
This was written up
It was
everywhere.
great.
We had a cover story on it, and it was fought back in Palatine.
That's part of my buddy Matt Flam, who's the Democratic committeeman
Yeah,
at Palatine.
I mean that was an incredible fight back
Yeah.
against a national anti-trans organization. You were mentioning Berwyn. Berwyn is now got basically almost half their city elected officials are LGBTQ.
Yeah. United
It's
Working
phenomenal.
Families.
Yeah, it's
their
phenomenal.
work
Not
there.
every LGBT person is perfect, so nobody agrees with everybody
Yes,
that's elected.
right. That's good we point that
We
out.
got bad.
Yeah,
and we
there
got
are
good.
right-wing gay guys I know in
Oh my
organizations.
God. In France, the right-wing gay guys are maybe going to help elect the right-winger. I mean,
Oh, I hope
even
not.
against their wishes. Yeah, there's always about 20% of our community that votes against its own interests.
It's fascinating.
AKA shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah. Well, we do have a couple wonderful people sitting out there waiting to be our last guest, but can I just ask, the Illinois Women's March on Springfield, it is Tuesday, the 25th. If people get on the bus, what time do they, this is an all-day event.
It's an all day.
But
Most
they
of the
do get home.
Yeah, no, most of the Chicago buses will leave around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and they'll get back probably around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It just depends on traffic. Tuesday, April 25th. The website is Illinois Women March on Springfield. A lot of tools on there on how to write letters to the editor, how to advocate. All the bills are listed. All the sponsoring groups and elected officials are listed. We'll be announcing our speakers next week, but I can let you know that for sure Susan Mendoza is going to be speaking, and we're going to have a few elected officials and activists as well.
Sweet.
Great.
The Bodius.
It's always a pleasure to
Thank
have
you so
on the
much
show, Tracy
to
Baim.
have
Yep.
Tracy Baim and Dr. S. Simmons, you're both going to be here again.
And don't go too far because in
We take
a
a
few
picture.
minutes we take a group picture. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to hear something from Harmony, Hope, and Healing while we set up our last segment here. You're listening to Live from the Heartland, WLUW 88.7 FM.
Chicago's
Sound
Sound
Alliance.